Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is the Raptor, and welcome back to Who'd Win and Why. And this time we got Sandman going up against Clayface. Now, honestly, this fight has been thought of ever since the dawn of time, or ever since these two characters were created. And it makes a lot of sense why. They both have a lot of molecular control over their own bodies. You know, Sandman with sand and Clayface with clay. So you could almost call them the molecular menaces of Spider-Man and Batman. I'm sorry for that one, but whatever. So anyway, yeah, these two characters now they're going head-to-head in the Who'd Win and Why ring, and yeah, I'm here to give my opinion on who I think would win in a fight. So, who'd win and why? Let's find out. So first I'm going to talk about Sandman. So Sandman, first let's talk about his strength, speed, and durability, and then we'll get into the stuff that he's most known for, you know, like sand and his sand abilities. So when it comes to strength, Sandman is actually really strong. I know that a lot of people know that he's strong, but he might even be stronger than you might think. Sandman has been shown under extreme circumstances to be able to lift up to like 85 tons in the past. And to put that into perspective, Spider-Man on average has been shown lifting up to like about 10 tons, which is crazy. 85 tons, literally 8.5 times that weight that he can lift under severe circumstances. So that is very impressive. Probably wouldn't be able to do this casually. 85 is probably where I would say he's probably about his max level of strength, but even so, that's still a ridiculous level of strength that he has. When it comes to speed, when it comes to like walking speed or just like fighting speed, you know, like throwing out punches, Sandman isn't particularly all that fast, although when he's using his sand attacks, he has been shown to use them pretty quickly. Although maybe an even better example of him using his speed to his advantage is when he turns himself completely into just a regular sand state, and he's actually able to travel in the air through the wind, or with the wind. So when he needs to get somewhere very quickly, he definitely can. So he's more so of a traveling speed guy than a fighting speed guy. His traveling speed is probably more faster than using his sand to fight, even though he can probably still shoot out his sand pretty quickly. It's just, you know, throwing punches, he's not really all that fast. He more so relies on strength and durability. So now let's get into his durability. So Sandman is pretty durable, as a lot of you can probably tell when Spider-Man tries to punch him, his fist will either go right through him and it won't phase him at all, or it won't even do anything to him. That's because Sandman can change the density of his sand, or like his body. He can make it so that it's like as tough as sandstone, or that it's even like just, he changes his density to the point where, again, you know, he's invulnerable to physical attacks. So not only is he really durable, but he can also change his durability, change his density, which I find pretty cool. Okay, so now that we've gone over all of those, let's go over the stuff that makes Sandman Sandman. So as I said before, he can change his he can change his body so that it just turns into sand, you know, just like that, and he can do this for pretty much an indefinite amount of time, and he can move around like on the ground as sand, and, you know, travel through the air as just a regular sand form. Also, he can use his sand, he can just like shoot out sand and use it as an offensive attack. He can also change his hand, or like any part of his body really, into different kind of weapons completely made out of sand. Generally, he likes to stick with the weapons that would do the most damage, like a giant spiky ball or a mace, you know, around his hand, or he would use something like, you know, like a giant hammer, or like 2 hammers or something like that. But really, because, you know, it's his body and it's his mind that's doing all of this, it's really just limited to his imagination. So whatever he can think of, he can make it out of his right hand, which I think is really cool. What else can Sandman do? A lot of also what Sandman's abilities kind of stem from is how much sand is around the area, because Sandman doesn't just have the ability to turn his own body into sand, or I guess it really is sand disguised as a regular person. You get my point. He can also, you know, call on sand in his vicinity, and doing this can allow him to do a ton of different things. One thing is being able to make sand clones of himself. What I do believe how Sandman works is that when he's just by himself and there's no sand around him, he might be able to make some sort of clones, but if he like makes like a little clone, you know, it will take a bit of him away, you know, because it's almost like it's his sand that he's using, taking it off of his body and making a new clone thing. That's what I believe anyway. If one of you wants to prove me wrong on that, or if you know something else, tell me in the comments below. But when he has other sand, he can use this other sand to make full-on clones of himself, and each one is capable of thinking for themselves. So, you know, there's not really an original after that at that point, I guess, or I'm not really even sure. And if all the clones want to come together, they can make a gigantic sand monster, or, you know, like, you know, just taking all the sand and going into a sand monster already. And, you know, this thing can be like 8 stories tall, but it just really depends on how much sand this guy has. If this guy has like a ton of sand in his vicinity, if he's at like the beach, he can probably grow to an even greater amount than just like 8 stories. So yeah, it really just depends how much sand is in the area. Another thing is that even if Sandman was able to be like ripped in half or something like that, he can just come back together. So you know, it is pretty hard to put this guy down. In fact, generally, in order for Spider-Man to be able to put this guy down, or at least just to be able to take him down, you know, even if he's not killing him, which obviously he wouldn't, you know, he's Spider-Man, but in order to be able to like incapacitate him to any degree, he needs to use one of Sandman's weaknesses. Now, Sandman's weaknesses, he does actually have a few more weaknesses than some people might think. Obviously, he has the standard weaknesses that would be able to beat anyone, like, you know, covering them with cement or ice and things like that. But he also has some sort of specific weaknesses. Obviously, you guys know that, you know, water, it will, you know, turn him into mud. This doesn't kill him, though. Obviously, he will, you know, soften again, and he will turn back to sand, because mud isn't, like mud forever, you know, eventually it will dry. And then there's also, you know, heat. Sandman, you know, obviously when you heat sand, when you heat sand enough, it will turn into glass. Obviously, this has to be a ridiculous amount of heat, but, you know, it is still there. It is still a weakness that Sandman has. Just I thought I'd bring it up. And also, I don't believe the reverse is possible. I don't believe if you cool down glass enough, it'll turn back into sand. So if he gets turned into glass, you know, he's glass forever. So, yeah, there's definitely that. Another weakness that Sandman has is that he's not really the smartest fighter. Whenever he's working with a team, he is never the brains of the operation. You know, like the Sinister Six, that's always Dr. Octopus. And, you know, whenever he's working by himself, he never strategizes. He more so just goes in for the kill and just relies on his bronze to do the work and his sand abilities. Although when he can, you know, why wouldn't you? You know, this guy, again, he's ridiculously strong, and with his, like, striking power, he can make it even better by turning his, you know, his hand into a gigantic hammer, or really anything that he wants to. So this guy is extremely versatile and is extremely powerful. It makes sense why he is one of Spider-Man's most dangerous enemies. Okay, so now let's move on to Clayface. Now, honestly, there isn't that much I need to say about Clayface that I haven't already said about Sandman, and that's because both of these characters are extremely similar, which is a reason why this fight is pretty cool. So let's talk about it. So obviously, Clayface is extremely strong. He doesn't use his strength to his advantage as much as Sandman does, or at least, you know, he doesn't really have to, just because, you know, when he's fighting Batman, Batman does, you know, like, Spider-Man's extremely strong, and, you know, Batman's not. Usually, Batman just relies to his smarts or his gadgets and things like that. But it is obviously proof that, you know, Clayface is extremely strong. There is proof of that. And he can also increase his size, which probably also increases his strength, since, you know, strength is directly related to muscle mass. So yeah, he can increase his strength by shape-shifting, but he's also just extremely strong in general. Much like Sandman, you know, just on his 2 feet and just throwing out punches, Clayface isn't extremely fast, but it is worth noting that, you know, just much like Sandman, when he's shooting out like a blob of clay or something like that, he's not particularly slow when doing that. When it comes to ranged attacks, he is pretty fast when dishing those out. And, you know, those blobs of clay, you know, they can hurt opponents, they can make opponents stick to the ground, and he can call back that clay whenever he wants. A big difference between him and Sandman is that, you know, his clay is more limited just to him. If he sees more clay somewhere, he can't, like, call it on. It's more so just, him, like, he can't call on, like, clay like Sandman calls on sand. He only relies on his own physical body. However, this physical body actually seems to have more molecular control, considering that not only can Clayface change his hands or any part of his body into any weapon that he thinks of, much like Sandman can, but he can also full-on shapeshift into regular people. And because he was a good actor before he became Clayface, I guess he technically still is a good actor, he's a pretty good impersonator as well, which makes the shapeshifting ability even more impressive. So again, this proves that he probably has a bit more molecular control over Sandman. I know I'm already doing comparisons, I don't generally do that at this point in the stage. But yeah, he does have the ability to shape change into people, which shows that he has like an unrivaled molecular control ability, which is pretty cool. So yeah, he's obviously extremely durable as well. Because he can shapeshift into people, I would have to assume that he can also change the density of his own clay. Although, you know, obviously, you know, when, like, sometimes when Batman tries to punch through him, the clay will actually, you know, wrap around the hand and, you know, like, stuff like that. So again, it is really hard to hurt Clayface. And the only ways to actually be able to put down Clayface or to incapacitate him, again, are to use things like ice and cement. But again, those are the kinds of things that would really stop anybody. But yeah, of course, you know, Clayface, you know, in order for Batman to even slow him down, he needs to use, like, freeze pellets or something like that in order to freeze him. And sometimes that doesn't even stop him. Sometimes Clayface has had other weaknesses, including water and electricity, although those weaknesses haven't always affected him. him. And, you know, I would have to assume that because it's inconsistent, those weaknesses are more inconsistent. And because he has such good molecular control, I would have to assume that generally stuff like water and electricity, he doesn't always get phased by it. So I'd have to assume that those really aren't weaknesses that I would have to attribute to Clayface. Generally, I would just have to say that, you know, again, like ice and cement, those are the kinds of things that would be good at stopping Clayface in his tracks. But yeah, like I said, he's very similar to Sandman. He can also make clay clones. Like, I think generally just makes tiny clones, as I mentioned with Sandman before, that he might be able to do. But yeah, generally, Clayface makes tinier clones, and he can also, I believe he can also regenerate his clay as well, if he wants to, which I guess makes sense because he can, like, increase his size, essentially making more clay, which is pretty cool as well. He also has a poisonous touch, which is really cool. And going back to the clones for a second, you know, the clones, I don't believe they actually, because he can, like, increase his size, when he makes tiny little clones, I don't believe, you know, it takes away any of his own body. He can almost just, like, replenish that with regeneration. And the clones, yeah, so I think the clones can think for themselves, and they can, you know, he can, send them to do his bidding while he's doing something else, you know, especially if he wants to make, like, a ton of them, and they go attack Batman. But the point is, yeah, Clayface is a very versatile fighter, and he is very similar to Sandman, and just like Sandman, Clayface is one of Batman's most powerful and dangerous opponents, and it makes sense why. It's very hard to put him down, and he is extremely versatile, and yeah, he's almost an unstoppable force, if I'm being perfectly honest. Same with Sandman. You know, both of these characters, really, it's really hard to stop them in their tracks because they'll just keep going. There's really not a lot of materials that people can use to their advantage in order to stop them. Okay, so now that I've gone over all of this, let me go over these characters and see, like, if I can decide who would win this fight. Now, this fight is extremely hard to call. In all honesty, it is extremely hard to call, and here's why. You know, first of all, when looking at the advantage, there are only really two clear advantages I can see, and one of them is Sandman having the speed advantage, and the other one is Clayface having the versatility advantage. I say that Sandman has the speed advantage because while both of them are about the same in terms of speed, you know, when it comes to moving on their feet, but also shooting out their what is it, you know, their projectile attacks, you know, like shooting out sand or shooting out clay. Again, just when it comes to travel speed, Sandman is able to, you know, like move with the air and, you know, like travel around, you know, just when he's in a standard sand form. And he sometimes actually uses this to his advantage in a fight too. Sometimes he'll quickly go around an opponent and, you know, attack them from there. So when it comes to speed, I'd have to say Sandman has a slight speed advantage. And the reason why I say that Clayface has a versatility advantage is because, yes, I know that both of them can make pretty much anything they want out of their hands or anything like that. You know, Clayface and both Clayface and Sandman can make hammers or any weapon they really want out of their hands or any parts of their body. Clayface, he does seem to be able to have a bit more molecular control, considering that he can shapeshift into actual people and is not only limited to making weapons out of his clay form. But it's also just the fact that you know, he has poisonous touch, and also just seems to have a bit more you know, a bit more abilities that Sandman just doesn't seem to have. Obviously, yes, Sandman does have the ability to call on more sand, but that's more environment dependent. Whereas Clayface, you know, all the abilities that he has, he can access them no matter what's in the environment, just because, you know, he doesn't need to rely on more clay. Obviously, I don't think he can grow to like the size that you know, Sandman could with extra sand, but you guys get my point. Overall, just like if we're putting both Sandman and Clayface in like an isolated area, I would say that Clayface is overall more versatile, although it is a very small gap, not a huge gap. However, even if I could decide a win, because, you know, it is really hard because both of these characters, they're so similar. Both of them are like, they can shapeshift their hands into anything they want, and, you know, they're almost unstoppable. But, you know, even if I could decide a winner, just going over their advantages, because, you know, they seem to be pretty equal in strength and durability and everything like that, except for, you know, speed and versatility, which I went on before. Even if I could decide a winner from those, you know, none of their attacks could really hurt the other opponent, you know, because, like, Sandman's clay attack, sure, it's good for fighting regular people, but what good would it do against Sandman, you know? Someone who can just, like, reform whenever he wants, and someone that can just, you know, keep going, you know? It's just like he'll keep reforming and keep fighting, and, you know, vice vice versa. Sandman's attacks, obviously they can do good. They can work really well against regular people, but at the same time, against Clayface, what's it really gonna do? And eventually, I feel like in a regular fight, both of these characters are just gonna keep fighting until one of them says, "Oh, this isn't really working. We have to let's just stop fighting," because both of them will just end up keep fighting unless one of them gets tired. But even so, how's one gonna kill the other? Who'd win and why is a battle to the death. So what do I do in a situation like this? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to look into their weaknesses. And like I said, this is not the kind of conclusion I like to do with Who'd Win and Why, because, Who'd Win and Why is to the death, and sometimes I have to do this. I have to go into their weaknesses, which can be environment dependent, but it's the only thing I can do. In fact, even if I was trying to do this in a battle not to the death, I can't even think of a real way to say, this person would win 10 times out of 10 or 9 times out of 10, because both of them can just keep getting back up and keep fighting. So again, I have to just look at who would be better to kill the other, who's more likely to kill the other with the environmental stuff that they have. Well, when I factor that in, I have to give Clayface the win, and here's why. First of all, when it comes to Clayface's specific weaknesses, like I said, these are weaknesses that not only both Clayface and Sandman share, which are, cement, covering with cement and covering with ice, but also just the fact that these things would be able to stop really anyone. Like, let's be honest, who wouldn't be stopped by being frozen in an ice block? Who wouldn't be stopped by pouring, like quick-drying cement on someone, Who wouldn't be stopped by that? It's just that these things are sometimes used against these two characters because it's the only way to stop them. So yeah, the weaknesses that Clayface has, Sandman has them as well. But the other fact of the matter is that Sandman does have other weaknesses, being water and heat. Now, the water weakness is not something that would really work when it comes to fighting to the death. Because while Clayface might think that Sandman's dead after using water against him, if he was able to, Sandman, eventually the mud will it will harden again, and it will turn back to sand, and Sandman will be he will be able to fight again. So, it won't really kill Sandman. Clayface might think it will, but it won't actually kill Sandman. However, it's that other other weakness that Sandman has, which is heat. Now, this advantage is very unlikely to actually be able to be used by Clayface, because the heat that would need it in order to turn Sandman into glass is ridiculous. It's such a high, I'm assuming, but I'm assuming that, just the regular, because, on a hot summer day, that's not really going to be able to turn Sandman into glass. And, I'm not really sure what Clayface could use to get more heat, because he'd have to get really lucky with the environment in order to be able to do that. However, when you compare all the weaknesses, that's really the only thing that one character could use to actually kill the other character. Because using heat against Sandman, I feel, would kill him, because turning him into glass, like I said, the process of turning glass back into sand doesn't exist. It won't happen. So, once you turn Sandman into glass, Glass Man, he's unmovable. He can't move, and he's in all intents and purposes, he's dead. He's not gonna be able to continue fighting, and even if he's still alive somewhere in there, he will be glass until he dies. So, I would have to assume that he would die anyway, just because he can't move, he can't do anything, he might as well be dead, that's just the way I see it. So what I'm essentially trying to say here, and another reason why I think that Clayface might not be susceptible to these kinds of weaknesses, at least not that much, as I said before, is because he has the ability to, he has more molecular control than Sandman does, or at least that's what I feel, because he can shapeshift into actual people. And he just seems to have more density control, more molecular and density control over his own body. So yeah, basically what I'm trying to say is when you compare the weaknesses that he'd be able to use on Clayface, that Sandman would be able to use on Clayface, not only would these not be able to kill him, it would only be able to incapacitate him. These are the same things that Clayface would be able to use on Sandman as well, like ice and cement. However, the stuff that Clayface could use against Sandman, they wouldn't really work that well on Clayface. At least consistently, they haven't been shown to work that well on Clayface, especially Heat. But when you compare it and you look at the weaknesses and how they would affect Sandman, Water obviously would not kill Sandman. However, Heat, I feel, would. So again, I really don't like resorting to this kind of conclusion where I have to look into their specific weaknesses and figure out, oh, well, I feel this character would use this weakness on this person, and even though it's very rare that it would happen, it's the only way for someone to kill someone. I hate using that. I really do, because I wish there was a simpler way to do it. However, when using two characters like Sandman and Clayface, that's the only way I feel you can do it. Which, again, I hate, and it doesn't really make for a good episode in my opinion, but it's the way you have to do it. Now, if I was doing this not to the death, then it might be a bit different. I really feel it depends, again, it depends how the environment works, because, again, just standard Sandman versus standard Clayface, the fight wouldn't really end with a clear victor. So I feel, like maybe if there's a lot of sand in the area, yes, maybe Sandman might be able to win against Clayface. Again, he wouldn't be able to kill him, but he might be able to win in a fight. And, if Clayface has water at his disposal just because of the environment somehow, then yes, definitely Clayface would win against Sandman without actually killing him. I feel like water being used against Sandman would probably be a lot more likely than the amount of heat needed to turn Sandman into glass used against Sandman. But anyway, so yeah, if you guys want to know who would most likely win a fight, like a standard fight between the two, there's really no way to answer it, because both of these characters would keep fighting. Their attacks really wouldn't work that well on each other. It just wouldn't really work. However, if you want to know which character would win in a battle to the death, just, if one character had any means of killing the other character, then Clayface would win. Because I just don't see any way that Sandman has the ability to kill Clayface. In fact, I think the way that Clayface died, oh, spoilers, the way that Clayface died in the Arkhamverse was actually by, like, freezing him, and then I think, like, Batman almost, like, sliced him in half with Talia al Ghul's sword, I think. I might be getting a bit of that wrong. But the point is, yeah, that's the same thing. Like, if you have to stoop to that thing in order to be able to kill Clayface, which is another thing that would be able to kill Sandman, you see where I'm going with this? Clayface just doesn't seem to be able to die really with using a way that wouldn't be affected against Sandman in the exact same way. So yeah, when you look at all the weaknesses and you look at the weaknesses that Sandman has that Clayface doesn't, I just feel that it's the only way to kill Sandman at all. So, in my opinion, the winner is Clayface. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you didn't enjoy this episode, I completely understand why. This is one of those fights where it's like they would honestly just keep fighting forever until one of their weaknesses ended up popping up, and there's only really one weakness that either character has, which is Sandman, that would actually be able to kill them. So that's really how I came to the conclusion. I hope you guys understand, just because there's really no other way to do it. I really wish there was, but I just don't see any other way. If you do see another way, if there's something that I'm missing, if Sandman actually can die in another way, or if Clayface can actually die in some way that I don't know about, please feel free to tell me in the comments below, because I'm always interested in learning new things about these characters, and you guys telling me new things about these characters is always fun. And if you guys enjoyed this video somehow, please give me a like, comment down below what you thought of it, if you agree, if you disagree, if you think Sandman will win, and you have good reasoning for it, if you think that Sandman could kill Clayface, again, tell me in the comments below. And if you could subscribe to my channel, guys, that'd be so great. That would really help me out. I make these videos as soon as I possibly can, and I try to, make these videos to the best of my ability, doing some research on my own and getting other bits and pieces from other people and other sources. So yes, I really hope you guys enjoyed it, but honestly, your view is plenty of contribution, so thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you watching the video, and next time on Who Would Win and Why, we got Bane going up against Johnny Cage from Mortal Kombat. See you all then.